Greetings, friends. I listened to Oren McIntyre, who is a conservative commentator. He's actually right wing, unlike 90% of the people who call themselves conservative. And then through his channel, I started listening to Academic Agent, this Welsh guy who's pretty bright and does a lot of live streams and entertains a lot of these dissident right ideas, even though the dissident right isn't a real thing, really, just like the alt-right hasn't been a real thing really ever. But these ideas are out there. There are people talking about them on the internet. The cultural commentary there, and through Academic Agent, he does streams with Scrump and Evelyn. I don't quite understand that. The names are very strange. One Scottish and English. I don't know, but I'm listening to Scrump and Evelyn now. It's good content. It's authentically right wing. There are things I would discuss, but they had this stream here with Academic Agent where they were talking about the 10 methods of containment, and they list 10 points. And some of these are distractions. Some of them are things that we complain about who are supposedly conservative, like a woke. Like we complain about woke. And then some of these things are positive in our view, things which we think are something we need to win. And the first one is Ma Israel. I guess Ma, that kind of means it's just this weird meme of our times. It's like you see it on the internet, but no one actually says that really. But anyways, it's kind of like a filler word. But Israel, we see recently taken by many in the so-called right as the cause to rally behind. We rally behind Israel, and that channels white nationalism because now the Jews can be playing the role of the white people against the brown people who are the Palestinians. White nationalists who can't find the outlet can support Israel, and the evangelicals, they already like supporting Israel, and there's the lobby and the money and then the military complex, and there's various factors going on here. But the point is, this is a containment, this is a channeling of authentic right-wing development. It stops it, it contains it. People might say, well, the fact that containment is going on shows that something's changing in the world. That's true as well. So it's not all there's always going to be some containment, but it's our job to push against that and to identify that. Maybe that's one way of looking at it. The second one is Democrats. This is the same thing for me in Canada. I don't care about all this talk of Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau. I just don't care anymore. They're all the same politicians. They work for the same people. They're funded by the same donor class. Yes, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have been awful for Canada, but do you really think Stephen Harper was that much better? Mass immigration was huge under the Conservatives. The same direction of our society. It's been going this way no matter what, if it's the NDP or the Liberals or the Conservatives, just like in the United States, if it's the Republicans or the Democrats, it's the same party. The Republicans just played 10 years social and cultural policy behind the Democrats. The left actually dominates the culture and creates the culture to an extent. And they're destroying authentic conservative culture. They're winning that war. People might say if you get caught up in the idea of a culture war, then you're already dividing your people, so it's not helpful to think in those terms. Yeah, maybe that's true, but there is a real war going on, a propaganda war, spiritual war. Thinking that politics and voting is going to change things is a containment. It is a way to disable authentic right-wing initiative. Obviously, I'm borrowing their ideas. I'm going to give commentary. I'm going to disagree or point out some holes with Scrump and Evelyn's conclusion. The third one is my Constitution. That's now the right wing being like, we need to bring back the Constitution, and James Lindsay, the Enlightenment was good, and we need to go back to respecting individual liberties and individual rights. Just a bunch of nonsense. And then that goes in with number 4 of free speech. I've talked about free speech before. I'm glad that Scrump and people in dissident right agree with me, of course, because free speech is stupid, it's gay, and it was actually, as he points out in another stream, which is good, you should check out on Scrump and Evelyn's channel. One of them devotes an hour to discussing free speech, and I already agree with his conclusions, but he points out how it was used in the 60s by the left, that idea of free speech, to basically infiltrate the institutions, and then once they get in there and once they get power, then they pull up the ladder behind them, and then it's like today, it's like, well, free speech for us, but not for you guys, right? But they were always cynical about it. That was the point. They were using free speech cynically, and then boomers today, conservatives, they actually believe in free speech. Like, they actually think it's a good thing. It's not even a coherent concept, because we all have parameters to what we think we should be able to say. I don't want to get into all that. I've discussed it at length, but it is a containment mechanism. And it's stupid because we wouldn't want free speech anyways, because we want to shut down all this degeneracy and all this stuff. Well, actually, that's the next point. They're saying degeneracy is another containment mechanism, which it's true. But the point is, if the right was in power, they would all be, there's never been free speech the way it's understood. Only some people in the American context will specifically say, well, free speech is a certain thing and how it relates to the government and how it was historically. And I can concede that. Like, okay, if you're taking that strict historical approach, but these guys are British, okay? They're talking about this in Britain, so free speech has moved beyond that original context, and now it's just a liberal foundation. But I've said enough on that. So 5 is degeneracy, and this is, again, like there is degeneracy in the world, and we can all focus on it, but to think that you could fix the problem by going after certain degenerate aspects wouldn't work. I mean, that would be good. I approve of that. But clamping down on something, that thing is the sign of a spiritual malady, whether it's prostitution, drug dealing, trafficking, all these horrible things. Like, that's the result of moral deficit in the society, which is a spiritual matter. So you do go after the degeneracy, you do talk about it, but at the same time, you can be distracted by focusing on certain degenerate issues like OnlyFans, pornography. Imagine spending a lot of time going after these things and trying to attack them. Like, it would really distract energy that could be better put to other more constructive right-wing real building. We want to build. We do want to attack the enemy, but we have to build. We have to build. And you can't have your energy drawn off by any certain issues like this. So I'm trying to walk a fine line here, because degeneracy is something that needs to be tackled, of course. I'm not opposed to authoritarian measures. But any leader that sells you on that point, you wouldn't say it's authentically right-wing, because the left could do the same thing. Then the next thing is woke. We all hear about, woke, Ron DeSantis wants to go after the woke. But the powers that be, they will use woke. They will use free market economics. They used communism before, they used Nazism, and they used capitalism. And actually the capitalists funded the communists, and they funded H-Man. So really, it's part of the same beast. Don't get caught up in the false dichotomy. It really has to do with a regime, or even beyond the regime, an elite class in the world. And it's partly tribal, but it's fundamentally spiritual and rejection of the truth, the logos. So they use woke, they use all of these things. So if you think, we got to get back to the time before we had the woke, no, these things have been coming for centuries, the whole 20th century. There wasn't a single decade when this war wasn't being lost by the right. Especially the 1980s, actually. And 7 is feminism. That's kind of the red pill thing. It's gynocentric society. It is. And feminism is awful. It helped destroy the family. That's true. But it's one of these other things that you can get fixated on. None of these are going to fundamentally reform the person to build a right-wing initiative. If you attack all these things, you have to build new humans. You have to develop new humans, Christian humans, who are moral, who go to church, who say their prayers, who exist in religious communities. It's religion. That's how you build, and that's actually what I don't think Scrump and Evelyn are going to go in that direction. But that's why you don't get distracted by attacking all these. I know I have attacked these things on my channel, and I will continue to do so. But you'll never see my channel just like becoming and it's the anti-feminist channel, or it's the anti-free speech channel, or the Democrats this. I mean, think of how many channels are out there, and this is how you'll get views, and this is how you'll distract people from what really counts, which is you have to build, you have to be well-rounded, you have to have a holistic understanding of the world. And I admit I'm not as well read and researched as these guys doing these live streams. They do their homework and they actually follow where the money goes. For them, it's about, first of all, acknowledging that there is a regime. The regime exists, or the cathedral, as Curtis Yarvin has called it. And that's more in the context of the global American empire, because it's one elite class dominating the global American empire. Now, beyond that regime, as I was alluding to earlier or discussing earlier, there is an elite class in the world. But you might also say there's competing elite classes, but at the very top, I think it's very united in the world. There's not quite a one world government yet, at least under the scenes, if not explicitly. But there is the semblance of that. We saw this with COVID. COVID was implemented, like those policies were implemented in Russia as well. Russia, which is fighting the global American empire right now. Now, I don't know if they went into COVID the same as the States, but they still went into that. So even though I favor Russia, even though I support Russia in this war, I know that the beast system will encompass the entire earth, and that includes Russia. And Russia's got plenty of things that are messed up about it too. But I just like that they're someone standing up against the global American empire. But and all the degeneracy, all these things that which can distract you, of course. But it's true. There won't be a rainbow flag in Russia anytime soon. And if Ukraine becomes part of the Russian Federation, then there won't be rainbow flags there. So this is a real geopolitical fact. Maybe I'm like an inverse of the Zionists. Like the Zionists gets excited about Israel fighting Hamas because it gives them an outlet. In all honesty, and I don't think this explains all of it, but yeah, to an extent, my sympathies with Russia are due to the fact that they're fighting the global American empire. They're Orthodox Christians. They're white. They have an ancient history, well, at least 1,000 years as a unified kind of people, at least under Orthodoxy. And Putin is not the kind of leader we see in the West at all. So for various reasons, it can be an outlet. I admit that. But I'm not so naive to think that, well, Russia's going to... First of all, they're not going to attack the rest of NATO. That's not happening anytime soon, unless something really crazy happens. I couldn't rule it out, but that's not their plan. But they, like China, like other countries, can be a distraction for some in the right because we're not in these countries and we're not members of those nations at the end of the day. We're stuck in a far worse situation where we barely have it. We don't even have a state, and we are close to not even having any sense of nation anymore in terms of kin group, in terms of heritage, in terms of identity. Right over the precipice right now. Russians don't have to worry about that. Chinese don't have to worry about that. They have their own problems. That could be another distraction, like geopolitics and states. Integration, that's point number 8. That's I like how they go after Konstantin Kisin, that insufferable rat-like man who is he's a disabling actor against authentic right-wing development. He claims to be a comedian. He does this podcast with this white guy who never says much. They're British. Well, British in quotation marks. At least this guy. This guy's a Russian Jew, I believe. So you can imagine. So they go after tribal politics. I guess that ties in with point number 10, which is collectivism. What's their podcast called? Trigonometry. So it's one of these things where they will go after the woke and certain of these points, but they'll push liberal values. They're basically liberals. So they're not conservative at all, and they'll say, well, to be British is based on values and liberal traditions, and it has nothing to do with your actual ethnic heritage, your bloodline, and all these kinds of things. And like, oh no, that's actually evil and bad. But he will accept an award as a Jewish comedian. He'll accept that award. But then he'll tell you, well, falling into group politics is the worst thing to happen. So it's just hypocrisy. But this is all containment. Number 9, based words. Now, I didn't get into that one, but yeah, I guess there are just based words floating around which attract a lot of attention, but that one I don't have much to say about. And then number 10, collectivism. I don't know, I guess that's similar to point number 8. I actually don't know what they mean by integration. Is that like multiculturalism? But point number 10, it's similar. It's collectivism. Collectivism is the enemy, even though if we look at history and we look around the world, if we look at like what even maintains a country, that is clearly collectivism. Oh, but that's communism or that's whatever. Yeah, well, that's stupid. That's to think of collectivism as like, well, that's just like you're being a communist. Well, obviously you're dumb because people are tribal. This is an undeniable fact of our existence, and it's not even a bad thing. We have our tribes. That's ethnic and that's biological. Maybe it's spiritual. These are the nations we have. And you can't just mix all the nations together. And people are different in how they think and what we can do. It's good that we're unequal because being right wing and conservative, fundamental to that is recognizing hierarchy, recognizing difference in the world. Even in the right wing, people will use the word racist all the time. And I won't take issue with it. I understand if you use the word in conversation, but even this word racist, which is entirely a left-wing device, entirely from Leon Trotsky and the Bolsheviks, it made its way into our language in the 60s. This is a thoroughly liberal left-wing word. The whole concept it isn't even coherent because we discriminate naturally, we differentiate. That's one meaning of racism as it's used today, but then the other meaning is that you hate people of other races just because you hate them. Let alone for the fact of hating other peoples. There would be no reason to hate any people based on any history of you between them and things that have happened. And stereotypes aren't real. This is the twisted nebula of weird juxtaposed meanings that comes across with the word racist or racism. A word which is no longer effective as an insult, but a word which is still used, even if sarcastically, in the right wing. So again, I would just say that's another distraction. That would be like Democrats are the real racists. I mean, the fact that you're saying something like Democrats are the real racists shows that you've just imbibed the whole leftist ideology. So in conclusion, Scrump and Evelyn, they say, well, you can't get distracted by these things. You have to organize, and you have to recognize that there's a regime, and you have to go after them, and yet there's only like, the dissident right doesn't exist. They'll admit that, and there's only like a few thousand of us around the world. And the people who would actually organize are like 24 people, and they've met all of them. Then they would admit this more or less unironically. So it's like good luck against the beast, but the beast will fall. The beast will fall. Yes, but are you going to make that happen? And are you going to live to see that day? Don't count on it, buddy. But what do we do is Jonathan Pajot's recommendation, which all we can do is to be better people, to be better morally speaking, and that's not subjective, that's objective. So you go back to church, you go back to religion, you get back in touch with your communities, you try to build a family in that context. That's the context. Now, we're not all going to meet that ideal, but we try and we build something in that context. Like, how are you going to have places to meet people in real life outside of a religion anymore? They're going to shut down the pubs. You won't have access to any common places. They won't rent any areas to you. You have to meet people somewhere, and we're isolated in our boxes. How else are you going to do it apart from religious communities? How are you going to do it? So again, dissident right recognizes a lot of what I see, but they haven't quite crossed over into orthodoxy yet. We're trying to bring the spheres together. We're trying to bring us all back to religion, but we're not going to see the day when our people organizes to fight and win this war. What we can do is help to build the foundation for generations in the future that will see that day, and I do believe that day will come. The only thing we can do is to pick up your cross and stumble up the hill and try to build something with meaning and do what we can for our friends and our family, to support them, and to do so in a religious context, because that's the only structure and the only binding agent we have ever had as a people. Even if you were pagans, you would have had some religious context binding you together. Hasta luego, amigos.